14 tons of material from an old mine in Lower Saxony determined not only how we got to the moon, but who got there first. A nearly impossible undertaking buried it, and the fate of the world hinged on who dug it up. It was a tiny fraction of the 15.15 million tons of iron ore that came out of the Georg Friedrich mine in Dornton between 1880 and 1968. Just 0.0000924% of that total. But it was one of the most valuable caches in human history. And it wasn't the iron that had come to the Goslar region through millions of years of sea surf and flood deposits and tectonic upheavals. The Romans had started digging and smelting all that in the 3rd century, and everyone already knew it was there. And it wasn't the silver ore that had been known to the region since 968 during the reign of Holy Roman Emperor Otto the Great, Charlemagne's true successor. When this payload was discovered in 1945, 14 tons of pure silver would have only been worth $250,000, or about $3.8 million today. What came out of the Georg Friedrich was beyond price, and only a handful of people even knew it was there. It was 14 tons of paper. Dieter Uzel had to figure it all out because his boss had a broken arm. He'd given Dieter a glorified permission slip and said, "There is little I can recommend to you on where to hide the documents. You are on your own." And he quite nearly was. Almost everyone else had already fled. Soviet T-34s were 80 kilometers to the east and gaining quickly. American M4 Shermans were just 19 kilometers to the west, and they were closing even faster. Returning to Berlin? Well, the war was effectively over, and everyone who knew even a fraction of what Dieter knew was marked to be executed to keep them from talking to the Allies. There was no refuge, just survival. And the furthest thing from his mind was the moon. The south was closed off, so the only viable route was north. Dieter chose to go up and a bit to the west with 10 men, 3 Opel Blitz trucks, 2 trailers, and more information than any of them could carry. Dieter had actually done this once before, when the lab had moved to Bleisroda, but he'd had railroad cars then. The men had to make small bundles for easy hand loading, but one of the departments had locked their documents in a 1-ton safe and then left with the combination. It took every last man to get that in the truck. And the way to Clausthal meant hiding in the trees from planes of all kinds. Friends and foes were all dangerous. They did make it, and then a bureaucrat told them to move on. So they went through the mountains to Goslar, and then to the small village of Dornton. And that's where they found a mine secured by a thick iron door. It was the perfect vault for a priceless treasure. The trucks drove to the mine in the darkness of night, and all the men but the drivers were locked inside so they wouldn't ever know its location. The mine had a small electric locomotive inside, and it still took them until noon the next day to unload all the documents. When Dieter dynamited the mine shut, he knew he was burying knowledge behind rubble for it to be discovered again later. But he didn't know when, and he certainly didn't know by whom. Then he got on a bicycle and hailed trucks to trek the nearly 300 kilometers back to Berlin to pick up his fiancée. They met up with his broken-arm boss, Werner von Braun, at Oberammergau on the Austrian border and drove into U.S. lines at Ruthe with the rest of their team. Surrendering to the Americans was better than rolling the dice with the Soviets, but they never leaked the location of the hidden documents. The U.S. Army knew the treasure existed. All that information from the Peenemünde Army Research Center, the Heeresversuchsanstalt Peenemünde. So they had to piece together clues from interrogating Hutzel, von Braun, and anyone else who might know the secrets of German rocket science. The Americans discovered the location of the Georg Friedrich mine and its scientific treasure, and they launched Operation Paperclip to bring more than 1,600 German engineers and scientists to the United States to work for them, some of whom pioneered the space program. We discovered 2 things hidden inside that old iron mine. One was a hoard of research that would alter the history of the world, and the other was a tangle of moral and philosophical complexities about the justness of doing great things with bad people and reaching unimaginable heights for mankind on a foundation built in part by evil. From Peenemünde to Paperclip to Pluto, our endeavors carry with us all these complicated Daedalian legacies, because when we leap forward, we never truly leave our faults behind. History and progress often turn on tortuous moral trade-offs and sometimes just on coin flips, like a panicked scientist choosing to go a little northwest instead of northeast. If von Braun never gets into a car accident and the men can't lift the safe, if Dieter takes a right instead of a left or never finds the perfect vault, if the Allies don't ever solve the mystery or the Soviets get there first, does Neil Armstrong still walk on the moon? And if you didn't know the real story of the buried treasure that took us to the moon, well, that's because they never told you.